Kris, what are you doing?
They say there's money in your house.
And so you're looking in the couch? You can't be serious.
Guess what? I just found some money. There's money likely in your house as well, and I'm gonna show you where.
Kris, has anyone ever told you that you're absolutely ridiculous?
Yeah, all the time. But I'll tell you what's more ridiculous, having piles of equity in a property and then doing nothing with it. It's like everyone was raised by Dave Ramsey, where everyone's like, oh, my house is getting closer to getting paid off. I'm like, today we're talking about how you find the equity in your home, how you calculate it, and then we're gonna discuss some options of what you do with it. My name is Kris Krohn, the #1 single-family real estate investor.
And I'm Carson, and for the next year of my life, I'm going to be an apprentice to this guy.
Maybe, as in like, the last time I sent you to go do an assignment, you did 4 things right, you did 1 thing not so right, and so today is actually a little bit of maybe redemption for you, Carson, because I am gonna give you a challenge at the end. I'm gonna see if you can actually go and complete this one.
Well, and I am gonna do everything in my power to try and redeem myself.
Today we're talking about one of the most important aspects of being a real estate investor. And since Carson quasi-failed on this in our last video, we're gonna break it down and teach it and make sure that you can keep up with the rest of the class.
I'm there.
Fair? Now check it out. Home equity is the game that we're talking about, and let's define it. Your home equity is the amount of your house that you own outright. So just imagine for a moment that this is your house. And if it's not paid off, you have a loan on it, which means you owe some money to the bank. But the house might be worth more than what you owe, and that portion is called equity. And in today's video, I'm gonna break down the 5 simple steps of how you not just figure out what your equity is, but what your usable equity is. And then we're gonna talk about what you can do with that equity to make a lot of money.
Okay, Kris, so if I have a house and I owe $300,000 on it, and it's actually worth about $350,000. Does that mean that difference, that $50,000, do I have that and I can just do whatever I want with it?
So it is true that in that example, you do have $50,000 of equity. The question is whether it's usable and whether you can do something with it. And so we're gonna cover that. You can actually use your equity to renovate or start your own business, or in this case, you can leverage it towards buying another house. Once you actually have access to some of that equity, you really can do with it whatever you want. And I'm gonna tell you right now, there's smart things that you can do with your home equity, and there's really stupid things that you can do with it as well, Carson. Now, before we can explore what you're gonna do with your home equity, figure out if you have usable home equity, let's actually pause and show you how much equity you may have actually in your house. There are 5 steps of how we do it, and here's the very first one. The first step is you have to estimate the value of your home. Now you might be talking to your neighbors and people might say, oh yeah, I think my house is worth, $430,000. My neighbor's house sold for that. That's an okay understanding of your equity. A better understanding might be going to a third-party website like Zillow or Redfin and seeing if their system has automatically calculated for you what your house might be worth. Of course, you could pay someone to do an appraisal, and if you actually sold the home, you would officially know what it's worth, because technically, a home is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. You can find out how much your home is worth using a number of different methods. Online home price estimators are an easy and free way to gauge your home's worth. Keep in mind that these are just estimates, and a professional appraisal will probably be your most accurate resource. But then again, most people only want to pay money for an appraisal if they're selling their home or buying a home or doing something a little bit more official. I would recommend using the free resources for what we're talking about today.
Well, Kris, Zillow says that my current primary residence is worth $655,100. Is that close enough to be able to base my equity on?
So for today's conversation, a Zillow estimate, a Redfin estimate, or these other online free calculators, they're good enough for what we're doing. So if you're watching this video, you can follow along and pull these numbers as we go. Now we have an estimated value. The second step is we need to explore what do you actually owe on your house? Because remember, usable equity has something to do with what it's worth versus what you actually owe. You need to know the outstanding balance on your mortgage, which can be found on your most recent statement. Weighing these numbers against each other will give us a tight picture of the total equity available so that we can then figure out what the usable equity is. Also, for today's video, you don't need to go and actually grab the statement and know what it is to the penny, but if you know within $5,000 or $10,000, we're gonna get some good enough math on how much usable equity you might actually have access to. The third step in finding out how much equity you have in your home is determining the equity that is actually there, which is different than the usable equity. Let me give you an example. Let's assume for a moment that this is your house. And let's assume that it is worth $410,000. So what I have here is a pile of cash representing the value of the house. I have a stack of $100,000, $100,000, $100,000, $100,000. That's $400,000 and an additional $10,000. That's the $410,000 that this home is worth. But I owe $220,000 on the mortgage. So here's $100,000. Here's $200,000, and now I'm gonna take the other $20,000. So this represents what I still owe to pay this house off. I still have $190,000 left over, and that number is called equity. Again, I took what it's worth, $410,000. I subtracted what I owe, $220,000, and the total equity in this home is represented right here in cash. It's $190,000.
Well, Kris, I don't get it. If there's $190,000 of equity in this house, why wouldn't the bank give you access to all of it? I mean, the value's there.
Okay, so here's the $190,000.
Yeah.
And if the bank gave all of this to me, how much security would they have in a house where they've lent every penny on it? There's no equity left in it. What happens to their safety position? Their risk goes through the roof unless there's some untappable equity, which means, hey, the market could adjust and go down, and we're still not going to become upside down with this loan.
Got it.
Make sense?
Yep.
All right. So then the question is, how much of this $190,000 is actually usable? How much of it would a bank actually give me? This takes us to the fourth step. We're going to talk about how you calculate what you're actually allowed to borrow. All right, let me show you how to actually do this math. The final equation for the usable equity is now to take the value of the home. In this previous example, it's $410,000. I'm actually going to punch that into my calculator. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that by 0.9. And that gives me a number of $369,000. Now, at this point in the equation, Carson, that $369,000 represents the amount of money that the bank doesn't want to lend above, because the difference between 410 and 369, which looks like it's somewhere around $40,000, that's their safety net. They're basically saying, hey, we want to keep at least $40,000 of equity in that home. But now I know the maximum that they're willing to lend. I can subtract that from what I owe, which is $220,000. And here we go, $369,000. I'm going to subtract $220,000, and that equals $149,000. But this $150,000, it's yours, and frankly, you can use it any way you want. And this becomes a revolving line of credit in most situations, almost kind of like a credit card, where the $150,000 is available, it's tied to your house, but if you don't use it, you don't have to pay, and if you do use it, you do have to pay. That if someone said, hey, let's take the first $50,000 out, and we're gonna renovate our house. We're going to actually make it nicer for us. And by the way, if all they're doing is carpet and paint and redoing some of the flooring and maybe the granite, that may not actually increase the value of the house very much. So often those home renovations, you don't get your money necessarily back out. It's not always a dollar for dollar trade. So that could be seen and felt as a little bit wasteful. Then they say, well, there's $50,000 that I want to put towards this car that I've always wanted, and that's going to also give me a payment of a certain amount, so I'm going to add liabilities to my life. And the last $50,000 I want to use to pay off some student loans, which all I'm really doing is trading one debt and consolidating it into a different debt. And now I've used all of that equity, I've increased my mortgage, and what's really happened? Well, my house is a little bit nicer, I'm driving a fancier car, and then my student loan used to be this payment, and now it's just been transferred into a house payment, but all of my equity is gone. And I think in most situations, people use their home equity the wrong way to actually increase their liabilities instead of something I'm about to recommend in just a second.
Well, and honestly, Kris, that's the only thing I've ever seen people do with their equity in their home, is like a renovation or put it into a car.
So Carson, when I bought my very first house, I bought it below market, and over the next year, it appreciated in value. And my wife and I walked into around $50,000 of equity. And I remember a year later, I went back to the bank and I said, I want to get a home equity line of credit because my mentor told me that that equity might be usable for buying my next house. And so within a couple of weeks, the bank actually gave me a home equity line of credit. It didn't cost me any money. And the line of credit was for just shy of $20,000. Now, $20,000 was enough for me to now go talk to my real estate team and say, guys, I'm ready for my next property. Let's go look for one. And within a matter of days, I found a property the next city over that was literally $90,000 below value because it was a foreclosure. It had just hit the market. I got my offer in, and the exact same day it got accepted. And 30 days later, I used the equity in my first house, and I went to that title company in Salt Lake City, and I remember when I was done signing, they said, okay, well, we now need money, for the down payment. And I had a checkbook access to my HELOC, and I wrote a check from the first house. It got transferred into the second house, and now I had 2 homes, and both were making me money.
Kris, that's exactly what you taught me to do after I had owned my first house.
Yeah, and that's why the 5th step is now called investing. Not throwing your money away at things that go down in value or things that literally don't create something for you. Understand that as of right now, this year, the average amount of home equity in the United States is at a record high. It's $315,000. That's the average. So like if we go back to this here represents literally how much money people have on average of equity in their home. Now that's not the usable portion, that's the total portion. But in most cases, it probably means that most Americans that own a house have around $200,000 to $250,000 that they could potentially use for investing. Now for most people, equity is a massive but invisible pool of money that people have access to but simply haven't taken steps to know its amount or even how to access it. Investing in real estate with $315,000 may as well be playing the game on easy mode. Because while most people know that 90% of all millionaires made their money in the game of real estate, the number one reason why people don't is because they don't have money for it, and that's because they don't understand their hidden assets. A 401k or an IRA is a hidden asset that you can tap into without tax or penalty to buy real estate, but so is the equity in your home. You can access that money, and then all of a sudden, you do have the ability to buy multiple homes. And as long as you invest the right way, that literally could be the key to unlocking your financial future.
Kris, I can't help but think that you were really lucky to have a mentor at the time that taught you how to do that, because most people, they see a line of credit and they're gonna wanna just buy more dumb stuff with it.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've done now for 20 years is just like my mentor got me started in real estate, just like I'm getting you your start in real estate, I love helping people get their start in real estate. Not just as a mentor, but I also help them turnkey invest in real estate where it's smart and intelligent. Because here's the truth, it's scary to use the equity in your home, or it's scary to touch a 401k or an IRA. It's like you've worked hard for years to save that money for retirement, but when you start doing the math and you start realizing, wait, it's not gonna be enough, I'm not saving enough. But if I work with an expert real estate investor that's done $2 billion worth of real estate transactions, thousands of deals, and has that kind of track record, well, all of a sudden that opens the doors for much greater possibility of taking something like home equity, 401k IRA, and then investing it intelligently and turning it into a real retirement instead of a pitiful one. Let me show you how cool this can actually be. Let's just say for a moment that you had $50,000 of equity in a home, or maybe it was a 401k or an IRA. Well, if you take a look at my track record in real estate over the last 10 years, on my last 2,130 rentals, I'm currently averaging just over a 60% annual ROI. And if you want to know what happens to $50,000 at that ROI, over a 20-year period of time, that turns into $12 million. And when people partner with me, we split the profits equally. So basically that's $6 million for me doing all of the work, and that's $6 million to my partner that decided to jump on the bandwagon and partner with me. That should give you a little bit of an idea how a little bit of equity over a long period of time at the right ROIs invested intelligently can potentially turn into a lump sum of money that gives you the kind of retirement that I think everyone hopes for. If you've been following along and you found that you have some usable equity, you can click the link below and I can show you how to invest in real estate, reducing as much risk as possible, but also tapping into my track record with the highest ROIs that I'm seeing anyone get out there. So Carson, it's challenge time.
Yes.
And before I give you the challenge, I just want to ask, do you feel like you really understand what we're talking about now by way of equity?
Yeah.
Because in our last video, I asked you to get me all the numbers, but I didn't get the concrete equity figures that I was looking for.
Okay.
But on top of that, I was also disappointed because I found out that you had rolled all of your success achievements into a final primary residence and locked over $300,000 of equity into that primary residence. And my concern, if I'm your mentor, is that I don't know exactly what my next move is to help you buy your next properties. Make sense?
Yeah.
So ultimately, I need to determine whether I'm really going to officially take you on for an entire year and help you grow your portfolio and succeed. And to do that, I want to give you a challenge.
Okay.
I need you to go back on all your properties and now share with me the exact equity that you have on the house you're living in, the 2 out-of-state deals in Florida, as well as the new house that you're building. And that's going to be the hardest one to figure out. The reason why I want these numbers is because I need to determine if I have enough options to show you how to access that equity and keep expanding your real estate portfolio. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Ultimately, I need to determine whether I want to spend the next year of my life helping you expand your real estate portfolio. I need you to get the numbers on all 4 of those projects, and then I need you, and here's the challenge, to present to me the plan of how you would access that equity so that you could keep expanding your portfolio. Basically, I need to see what you know and understand and what you're willing to do. So, are you up for the challenge?
Yes. Yes. Challenge accepted.
Let's do it. So here's my dilemma. I really like Carson. He's got equity to play with, but I don't know if he's willing to do what it takes to expand his portfolio. I think he has sunk too much of his money into his primary residence. And so really for me, this challenge is about determining whether he has the grit and whether he's willing to make the sacrifices necessary so that he can put his financial future first. Bottom line, Carson's got to bring a worthy plan to the table if I'm going to mentor with him. And at this point, I'm a little unsure if he can do that because in the last episode, he made a huge mistake, a $1.3 million mistake. And I'm disappointed. I'm not sure he can recover from it. And if you want to see how Carson's journey began with me, and if you want to see how he got into hot water in the first place, then go ahead and click right here and watch this episode.